Hi there and welcome back to the channel. I've been thinking of upgrading a bit my setup and filming some real life videos because I've seen I get some views on the videos I made in Yu-Gi-Oh! Omega, so maybe for example for deck profiles or even for some combos I can film it with actual paper cards and explain a bit of my decisions better than just in text. So this is going to be a deck profile for branded. The deck is pretty much solved right now. Whenever new cards appear for the branded deck, people already know how to use them. They're also pretty, once you get used to the deck, it pretty much flows by itself. But it's a very fun deck because the ceiling is super high and you can do a lot of cool plays with it, and it really feels, also the core is very big, and maybe in the future I'll show you, but you can even do 60 card pile decks with that are pretty decent with just branded cards. So it kind of feels like an anime protagonist deck, you know, a deck that should be bricky as hell, but it definitely works and it's currently meta, right? The list is going to be pretty standard. Again, the deck is pretty much solved. So, but there's going to be some choices I made based on my local meta, and I should emphasize this too. You should uh, adapt your list for your local meta, right? So, the usual one Lobelion, one Saronir, and the despia package of 3 Aluber, 1 Tragedy and 1 Ad Libitum. Some people cut Ad Libitum nowadays, but as long as you're playing branded red in your list, I see no reason not to play Ad Libitum. It simply comes up a lot of times, especially in grindier games. 3 Albas and 1 Albion. I feel like 3 Albas is kind of mandatory right now. The current version of the deck will special summon Albas from the grave again and again with cards like Rinbram, right, and Quem. So having 3 Albas is so that you can always leave one in the graveyard there to get it back on the field is always nice. 2 Cartesia and 1 Quem. 2 Cartesia is basically the new standard. Everyone who wants to play the full power branded version will now play 2 Cartesia. I know it's an expensive card, but it really pays off. Basically, you'll always get one on the field first turn via either fusion deployment or Quem. But you need an extra one for follow-up or to bring back to the field if you somehow get Lulu in the graveyard, right? And Lulu Wallet, I think, is a very powerful card. Sometimes it comes up with the negate, and when it works, it works. If you time it correctly, it can really stop your opponent, and it's very hard to play around Lulu's negate when you just summon it via Grand Gnome, if you know how to time it against certain decks. 2 Mercurium. This also is another card that people now choose to play at 1 because people aren't playing Goldsark. I'm not playing Goldsark either, but I like the extra monster negate. And you know, you can always search it, like if you have a lot of the other cards like Cartesia already on the field or Quem. If you hard drew Albion and you don't have good searches, you maybe already used the Mercury on a previous turn, you can search it with Lost so that you have an extra master negate to help you. For the spells as part of the core, pretty standard and mandatory: 3 branded fusion, 3 branded opening, and 3 fusion deployment. Some people choose to run maybe 2 or even 1 fusion deployment because now they're playing 2 Cartesia, but I think it's not that good to cut down on it. Basically, a fusion deployment is an extra copy of Cartesia, and I don't see why would you want to not play 5 Cartesia, right? One branded in red, one branded in white, and one branded lost. A lot of people cut the branded in white and don't play it anymore. Some people never played it, but I love it. It just has an extra fusion effect, an extra fusion spell, and sometimes it allows you to play without needing a branded fusion or that much graveyard setup. So it's basically a poly that can double as a miracle fusion for this deck. And it's searchable. There's easily searchable. There's, in my opinion, no reason to play it. If you want to cut it, you should be playing 2 branded in red or something, because I don't like relying that much on branded fusion and having it as like the only reliable fusion spell. You know, you have Cartesia, but it's still a monster effect, so it's not always going to save. And for the traps, 1 branded banishment and 1 branded retribution. Retribution is standard, but banishment, a lot of people don't play it, but I think it's just a super poly and in a trap form, and in a lot of lines I get Lubellion on the field by sending Albion to the graveyard, so this is like always online, and sometimes it does more than just branded in red, because sometimes I don't have the setup for branded in red. Because of the hand I drew, I don't necessarily have despia in the graveyard, but I have the Albion, so setting this actually works sometimes better than setting this. Okay. For the non-engine cards, again, a lot of people try and play with Nadir. I don't like playing with Nadir because it requires extra engine requirements. Like people who play with Nadir also add 1 kit and 1 branding in high spirits and whatnot. I don't like adding even more gems to the deck, so I'm not playing Nadir. I'm playing Call By, Foolish Burial, 3 Super Poly, 3 Crossout, 3 Ash, and 2 Imperm. So basically, Super Poly is the best board breaker in my opinion. As long as you're running both Mud Dragon and Garura, you're going to hit literally every deck under the sun. It's amazing when you hard draw Albaz and the Super Poly, you can basically kaiju away, or more like a Kurikara, but it's even better, you know. You use one of your opponent's monsters with your Albaz and they can't stop it, unlike the Albaz normal summon, you know. Crossout is, in my opinion, much better than Nadir, and I play 3 Ash and 2 Imperm since these are the most generic hand traps, and they can, if you draw them going second, it's pretty good against most decks. But 3 Crossout is also a choice that you have to make also based on how many branded players are at your tournaments, because running Crossout in your branded deck in a branded mirror will a lot of times win you the game, because you can negate anything in their deck with 1 Crossout, you know. Yeah. So now I'm going to show you a kind of side deck idea I have for my local scene. So one masquerade. If you know you don't get into time too often, you should definitely cut it. Masquerade isn't. It's more like a gimmick now, and it won't win you that many games unless you know you're going into time a lot and you have maybe a lot of new players who take a lot of time to think and whatnot. So masquerade in that case will win you game threes, right? Dimensional barrier as an extra target for the crossouts when going second. Bestials, 2 Magnamut, 1 Dreesworm, and I'm thinking of even raising up the number. Basically at my locals there's a few, 1 or 2 tier elements players that are doing pretty good. And again, there's the branded mirrors, and bestials work pretty well against branded. And occasionally you might see some mathmech. So for these reasons, this keeps sitting here. And a gimmick puppet. Gimmick puppet, I choose to put it inside. You could definitely put it in the main deck, because nowadays it's even better with the new album than it was with Explosion. But it's a gimmick in itself. It definitely is still an auto win button, and it feels bad not to have it in the deck at all. But it's definitely more fun to play without it, you know. And 3 Radiant, 3 Dark Ruler, and some back row hate. I would definitely play Kurikara instead of this, because it works better against a Rysart, but I don't have Kurikara. This is basically your out to Sprite. Like, you resolve this against Sprite, you're winning the game. And this is for the random surprise back row heavy deck, you know, for Runics, for Labyrinth and whatnot. Even better against Runic, because you Cosmic the Fountain, you know. So finally, the extra deck, which is probably the most standard out of all of this, because everyone is literally running kind of the same things, especially if you play Super Poly and whatnot. So you have the Granguignol, the Quertis, and the Lulu. Some people play just one of these. Lulu, as I said, is pretty great since it summons a Cartesia from the deck, but you could choose not to play it. Although I really like its negate. I think it comes up a lot. I think I mentioned this already. Some standard, 2 Mirror Jade, 1 Lubellion, and 2 Albion. I've tried playing with just 1 Mirror Jade, but having a follow-up, Mirror Jade still remains the boss monster of the deck, and having its second copy definitely is good for the grinding. We have 1 Sprint, 1 Rimbram, and 1 Albion the Sanctifier Dragon. This is amazing because it still allows you to play the gimmick puppet, right? But also it allows you a lot of times to summon Albas and just fuse away with some of your opponent's stuff. And it cannot be used as fusion material. So again, in branded matchups, this cannot be super poly, right? Or if you play against elements and they run super poly as a board breaker, they can't super poly this away. Again, there's like hero players at my locals, and they also play super poly, and this is pretty good against them. We have some standard super poly targets, the Dragostapelia, Garura, and Mud Dragon. I think if you run these 3, you basically cover any deck under the sun, the super poly targets. And the Guardian Chimera, which is the honorary Albaz card, or rather despia card. It should say one despia in the fusion materials, because you basically always make it with something like branded in red, and it wins a lot of games by itself. The ability to pop 2 and draw 1, sometimes it's just too good if you time it correctly. And that's it for my deck profile. I hope you liked it. And if you find it useful, and if you find the other videos, combo tutorials and whatnot useful, please like, subscribe and share. And if you have any comments and want to discuss deck building and combos, please comment down below. And see you.